Take a journey with us to Western Sudan, specifically the Darfur region, where a conflict has resulted in a United Nations estimate of over 300,000 dead and millions more displaced from their homes. One of the most important steps in understanding the conflict in Darfur stems from understanding the geography of the region. It's important to note how Darfur is a landlocked portion of Sudan, much like South Sudan was when it was still part of Sudan. Immediately, one can see the imbalances that would be created with such a system, with the port of Sudan being really the only access point for exporting oil and other goods from the country. In fact, many scholars cite the Sudanese government taking advantage of the Port of Sudan's position as one of the major causes behind both the Second Sudanese Civil War, which lasted from 1983 until 2005, and for the Darfur conflict, which started in 2003 and is still ongoing. In addition to the geography of the region, the peoples and the way of life that they live plays another important role in the conflict. Historically, southern Darfur was comprised of farming cultures of black, non-Arab peoples. As opposed to their neighbors in the south, the northerners in Darfur often associated themselves with Arab populations and were often cattle herders. Global climate change during the latter half of the 20th century saw farming lands in the north of Darfur slowly being eaten away as the Sahara spread. As a direct result of the desert spreading further into northern Darfur, the farmers were put under great pressure by the northern cattle herders due to the fact that they had much less grazing land than previous. So essentially, Darfur was experiencing a natural crisis. At the same time, these issues were being further exacerbated by the Sudanese government, often associated with the capital city, Khartoum. Arguably, the most important single person in this conflict was President of Sudan, Omar Hassan al-Bashir. Bashir came to power in 1989 when he led a group of Sudanese military leaders in a coup to overthrow the democratically elected Prime Minister Sadiq al-Mahdi. Unsurprisingly, following the military coup, there was no real head of government anymore, so al-Bashir decided to run for the position, in which he was elected and has now been sitting for 3 terms. Despite his 3 terms as the president of Sudan, al-Bashir has often had many allegations against him, accusing him of, in fact, rigging the elections. Even more disturbing than the story of how al-Bashir rose to power and is most likely retaining his power is the story of how he has handled the situation with Darfur. The conflict in Darfur, as previously noted, began in 2003. Al-Bashir's Sudanese government forces did not end the Second Sudanese Civil War until 2005 in October, when the peace agreements were signed. Although it was quite clear that the Second Sudanese Civil War would be coming to an end shortly, there were still some minor skirmishes in 2003 and early 2004. Bashir's regime was obviously threatened enough to the point where he felt it would be necessary to launch some type of intervention into Darfur. At this point, it's important to remember the ties that Bashir and the Sudanese government had to prominent oil purchasers. With China being one of the largest purchasers of Sudanese oil, they obviously had a vested interest in the region, and therefore a vested interest in supporting the government. So when Bashir came to the Chinese government and explained that he had an issue with a rebellion that was threatening their oil supply, they said, "Hey, we have a solution for that." So they gave him assault rifles, attack helicopters, a whole armament of brand new modern weaponry. At this point, it would only be a matter of time before tragedy struck the region. Despite their continued denial of any association with the group, the Sudanese government has obviously outfitted the Janjaweed forces that have committed many of the acts of genocide with a large majority of weapons and vehicles. The initial mission of the Janjaweed was to go into Darfur and take out the rebel groups, mainly the Sudan Liberation Movement, SLM, and the Justice and Equality Movement, the JEM. However, these groups had fractured many times during the conflict, and there were many offshoots of various groups. The Janjaweed ended up killing pretty much indiscriminately in the region.
مشكلة جنجويد مع الحكومة السودانية يوم الآن هنا كان شهر 8 يوم 22 وهجمونا في هلتنا وقتلوا مننا من الهلة قتلوا تقريبا 21 نفر وعندنا أخوان بتاعي صغار مني مرحومين 3
وأخوي والدهم قتلوا وتاني خالتي 3 قتلوا الليلة قوة الشيخ ولا عندنا خلق ولا عندنا نار فقدنا من حوالي 3 أهوال و4 أمام وبنتي فقدت من بنتي أخواني 2.
There have been many attempts at peace in the region. However, in many of the talks, groups either aren't included or decline to participate. This has led to a large majority of these groups causing further problems despite having peace agreements in place. Again, as we also noted, many of the groups had splintered off into different factions, so the conflict has really evolved to a point where it would be difficult to stage any kind of meaningful intervention just due to the sheer size of how many groups there are involved. Additionally, despite 2 warrants from the International Criminal Court, President Omar al-Bashir is still at large. To this day, Sudan and Darfur are still at each other's throats, making it difficult to see any kind of lasting resolution possible in the immediate future.